I'm Carmine Gallo here with Daniel Pink, legendary TED speaker. What, are you still on the top 10?
I think so.
Most viewed TED Talks of all time. Obviously a number of New York Times bestsellers, Drive, A Whole New Mind. One of my favorites, To Sell Is Human. But let's talk about the new book, When, the Secrets to Perfect Timing. We're doing this interview at 11:30. Good timing?
11:30 a.m., as you can tell by the light here. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good time. I mean, what a lot of the research shows is that we go through the day in a peak, a trough, and a recovery. And most of us have our peak in the morning. So if you think about things like good mood or mental acuity, this is actually a pretty darn good time to do it, Carmen. I don't know, how are you feeling? You feeling mentally acute and spiritually aloft?
High energy, elevated, cognitively sharp. I think this is a good time. You talk about positive moods, and your mood goes up in the morning, and there's a trough in the afternoon, then it goes back up in the late afternoon. Well, when is the best time then, based on all of your analysis, to do those creative tasks?
In general, for most people, the best time to do that is late in the afternoon, and the reason is two things. One is the elevated mood that you're talking about. Remember, peak, trough, recovery. Our mood goes back up. But later in the day, most of us, those of us who aren't owls, we are less vigilant. The reason that the peak is an important period of our day is that we are vigilant. We're able to lock down, bat away distractions. We're less vigilant during this other period of the day, and that combination of reduced vigilance and elevated mood is powerful, because when you're brainstorming or doing creative work, you don't want to be too locked in. You want to be a little looser. And so the combination of that mental disinhibition and the elevated mood makes it a very good time for creative work, conceptual work, brainstorming, iterative work.
A lot of my viewers are going to be leaders. They're entrepreneurs, aspiring leaders. In terms of all of the analysis that you've done on perfect timing, I think you went through 700 studies, you and your assistants. What can they learn from this?
Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff to learn on this. If there's sort of a mundane thing to learn about it, is that when to schedule meetings, all right? And we have such a big problem in terms of scheduling meetings, because when we schedule meetings, there's only one criterion, and that criterion is availability. That's all we think about, all right? What we need to be thinking about in scheduling meetings is this: what kind of meeting is it? Is it an analytic meeting? Is it an administrative meeting? Is it a meeting where we need people to be creative? What kinds of people do we have going there? Do we have people who are morning people? Do we have people who are intermediate? Do we have people who are evening people? And the lack of intentionality in scheduling meetings is appalling. I mean, the when of meetings has to be a strategic decision, not a convenience decision. And I can't think of a single company anywhere that is thinking of the scheduling of the timing of meetings as a strategic decision. And so there's one thing that your audience can do to get an edge on its competitors is think of meeting scheduling in a strategic way rather than a convenience way.
What about client presentations, which I write a lot about? I think the general rule of thumb that everybody knows is if you have to give a presentation after lunch, probably not the ideal time. But what else have you learned about giving presentations, sales pitches? Yeah,
it really depends on what the presentation is. But let's talk about sales pitches here for a second, because we can widen our scope a little bit and talk about how do people make decisions, all right? So, because what you're doing is you're trying to get your prospect to make a decision. And what the research shows is that when people make decisions, they usually come with a default decision. They have a default of what they're going to do. And if you're a prospect in sales, the default is no, right? If you go to your boss for a raise, her default answer is no, okay? So when are people likely to overcome the default? And what the research shows, some very, very intriguing research, even on judicial decision making, is this: people are more likely to overcome the default early in the day and immediately after a break. And so the wisdom of like not pitching immediately after lunch, I don't know. Like immediately after lunch is not a bad time. Early in the day and immediately after breaks, that's when the research shows people are more likely to challenge the default. Now, to be fair, like all of this research, there's no guarantee. What we're talking about here is, can you use some of this research to dial the odds in your favor? So if your pitch has a 20% chance of succeeding ordinarily, and if you pick the right time of day, you have a 27% chance of succeeding, I'll take that. Or you don't have a 100% chance, but I'll go from 20% to 27% because over time, that's going to make a huge difference.
Let's talk about one of the intriguing findings, which is the importance of taking frequent breaks.
Yeah.
And one of the studies that you came up with, or that you found, showed that 5-minute breaks every hour is a really good idea.
Sure.
Well, we're in Palo Alto, not too far from where Steve Jobs lived, and I remember when doing my research on Steve Jobs for one of my books that he used to take walks. So when people would visit with him, he would say, hey, let's take a walk. So I think intuitively that's what he was doing. He was taking those frequent mental breaks.
Absolutely right. I mean, what we know about breaks is actually amazing. Originally, when I started working on this book, breaks were going to be a couple of pages in a chapter on the daily pattern. And the research is so overwhelming, I ended up writing an entire chapter on just breaks and how important they are and what we know about breaks. And what we know about breaks is exactly as you say, Carmine, what Steve Jobs intuited. We should be taking more breaks, and we should be taking certain kinds of breaks. And the kinds of breaks the research tells us we should be taking are this. We're better off doing something rather than nothing. So that 5-minute break, better than doing nothing. A 2-minute break, better than doing nothing. We know, see Steve Jobs, social is better than solo. That breaks with other people are more restorative than breaks that we do for ourselves, even for introverts. We know that moving is better than stationary, and I think that we're beginning to recognize how important it is to be in motion rather than sedentary all the time. We know that outside is better than inside. And so this idea of going out for a walk outside with somebody is really strongly supported by the science. He intuited that was the right thing to do. Now we have the evidence, the research to back that up, that intuition.
Well, Dan, it's always the right time to interview you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with the book.
Thank you, Carmine.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.